Bob Baggs, Marketing Manager, Radio and Victrola Division of RCA Victor.
What you're going to hear about today is nothing short of a miracle. It's dramatically new. It's an RCA Victor exclusive, made possible only through years of research, inventions, and innovations. Living stereo, played on a record, through the all-new 2-in-1 RCA Victor stereo orthophonic high-fidelity Victrolas.
I don't have that specific model, but I do have Victor's 1929 orthophonic hi-fi system, and in 1929, this was the best you could get.
In this speaker, you can hear the left-hand section of the orchestra predominating. In this one, the right-hand section predominates.
Was he right? Were they the first? Were they exclusive? No, they weren't exclusive. They weren't the first. Here's my beautiful modern hi-fi stereo system. Let's see what it took to get here. A lot of research and inventions. One of the first, we'll talk about these in a little more detail, is tape machines. Here is the Ampex 200A, which we might say was one of the machines that made it all possible.
Wow.
Here is the Westrex cutting head, which is another necessary invention. And last of all, that we don't think about, before we had stereo going, we didn't have any stereo cartridges. Oh, hey, vinyl community, and welcome YouTubers from everywhere. Yeah, this channel is about music and records, and we're going to show and talk about records here, but I thought it was kind of interesting how we got from mono to stereo and how stereo became popular. We just saw there at the beginning, the guys at RCA Living Stereo said, no, they were the first. Well, they were right there at the beginning, so the first is a little bit tricky sometimes to pin down. We'll talk about RCA. Who was first? Audio Fidelity, December of 1957. They produced a record with 500 copies that was the first publicly issued stereo record. Working hard right there at the same time that Audio Fidelity was and stereo was, Grand Award Records, which later became Command Records. The history and development of these machines is quite fascinating. We had tape recorders in the 1930s, but we're going to cut to the chase here. In 1947, Ampex developed the 200A, which was pretty much the standard then on for recording. This is the latest edition of the 200A, which in 1957 was delivered to Capitol Recording Studios.
Now, Mr. Long, an exciting point in any success story is how it started. How did Ampex get into this new field?
Well, Bob, that's kind of a long story, but perhaps this part of it might be of interest. Back in 1948, when the boys at Ampex completed their very first machine, they piloted in the car of one of the engineers and drove to Los Angeles with it for an interview with Bing Crosby. After Bing had heard the machine, he was obviously very much impressed and The following day or so, Mr. Basil Grillo, who was Bing's business manager, came to the company's plant. Mr. Grillo said, Bing liked that machine very much. He said, how do I go about getting one for him? The boys at Ampex put their heads together a bit and sharpened their pencil and said, well, one of those machines costs $4,000. Furthermore, we'd have to have a purchase order for at least 20 machines, and that's $80,000. And then we'd need to have a check for $60,000 accompanying the purchase order. Basil said, well, those are kind of rough terms, aren't they? But Bing wants one of those machines, and if those are the terms, here's an order for 20 machines, and here's a check for $60,000.
Well, it seems to me that Bing put a tremendous amount of confidence in a new company with a relatively new product.
Well, he did that, and perhaps even more significant, Bob, is the fact that when Ampex delivered those machines to Bing, they worked beautifully.
This specific machine is number 16 of those 20 machines that were first delivered to Bing Crosby. Starting in the mid-1950s, some of these companies were issuing stereo tapes because there were tape recorders, tape playback systems for the home that you could buy back then. And interestingly enough, for example, one reviewer has shown a command tape from the 50s that then later was issued on phonograph record, and they can compare the differences, and of course the tape at that time sounded better, like you would expect. Just as you would expect, the tape formulations, the tape that was used to record on these machines, was just as important as the machines and developed over time. It just turned out that all these various people working on various products all got it together around 1957. The Westrex cutting head was a key component which made the records possible. Stereo cartridges were almost late to the game. Here's a picture of the Shure M3D, which is one of the early stereo cartridges. In 1958, Shure developed the first moving magnet cartridge, and that's what really helped make the music come to life. The other thing that happened is, before June of 1958, there basically were no affordable stereo cartridges. In June of 58, the technology developed such that the price came down from $250 to $30. And now, of course, the prices that cartridges can go are unlimited.
Here's another example of the versatility of Ampex tape recording equipment. What you're seeing now is a familiar sight, a train coming into the station. And the sound, too, is familiar. Listen. Ladies and gentlemen, the sound picked up by those 3 microphones was played back to us on an Ampex recording tape with 3 separate tracks reproduced over 3 different loudspeakers that were each carrying sound from one of the 3 recorded tracks. We were astonished to find that with our eyes closed, we were actually able to follow the direction of that train from left to right without even seeing it. That is Ampex stereophonic sound.
Those history of Ampex video clips that you've seen previously were all recorded in 1950. I wonder where in late 1957 Audio Fidelity Records got the idea. I do not have that record of the locomotives that you see there. It's fairly common and easy to pick up. But that was not the first one. That's people think it is, but the first one had a different cover, which I've seen a picture of, but I could not find that. And on side 1 was the Dukes of Dixieland, and on side 2 was Train Sounds. Only 500 copies of that record were made. They were given out to people in the business to show what was going on and to advertise and promote, and so I've never actually seen a live copy of that record. The first records issued to the general public were in March of 1958, and the first record issued was Johnny Puleo on harmonica, Then the second record issued was the railroad record that you saw the cover of there. The third record issued was Lionel Hampton, and the fourth record issued, 58-51, was the Dukes of Dixieland. As hard as it might be for most of you to imagine then, Dixieland, kind of the offshoot of traditional jazz, was very popular because mostly these records were sold to older people who wanted to listen to their childhood music, not yours. Luckily, a few years ago, I picked up an Audio Fidelity record that had a mint copy of their catalog. So I'll open this up and give you a chance to look at it. Then we'll show a few of these, and then I'll show you one of the records. I'm going to put this up. I know you all saw this record when I flashed it by. Satchmo Plays King Oliver. Yeah, this is one of the ones that's been reissued by Analog Productions, and any of you interested in traditional jazz have a copy of this record. It sounds great. A lot of people think of these things as kind of hokey because the people today, they never heard any of the kind of music that's on this stuff. Their grandparents listened to this kind of stuff. So one of the things they show here is what is stereo sound, description of all of that. But on here, there is Johnny Paleo. That's the first of the 4 records that were issued in March. Of course, the Dukes of Dixieland were their most popular group, and you see just on this page they have 7 records. I do have the first one that they issued, Marching Along with the Dukes of Dixieland, Volume 3. This record came out in 1957, and this is the mono copy, which is 1851. Now, when they put the same records out in stereo, they changed the first digit, a 1 to a 5, and so the stereo version of this is 5851. They were nice records, good music, well done. Now, here's Volume 4. I only show you this one because this, on the label there, you can see it says 1860. Oh, that's a mono. Oh, what did they do? They hadn't reprinted jackets yet. So down here, we get a gold sticker laid over the album jacket so that you can tell it's stereo. It took them a little while to get new jackets on these records that had already been recorded and issued, but were all in mono. Let's hear the Dukes. have quite a few audio fidelity recordings, but I'm only going to show you one more. I paid $5 for this one. A lot of that stuff I got out of dollar bins. Here's a sampler record with nice color pictures of the covers. This record was issued in 1959. My copy is a 1961 reissue. Stereophonic demonstration and sound effects records. Pretty much all of the companies did one of these. Enoch Light, which many of you are familiar with, started Grand Award Records in 1955. There were also several sub-labels, including Waldorf. In 1959, he founded the subsidiary of Grand Award, Command Records. In October of 1959, he sold Command Records to ABC, which was not until later to really start issuing anything else, when the rock and roll era started. One of his important things was he was a musician and really good with sound, and he hired Robert C. Fine, who, as recording engineer, who many consider as one of the finest in the early days. And he was to go on for some time. We'll talk about that a little more. Grand Award records were issued until 1961, but ABC went on, so it's a little bit of a mess when you find some of these later issued records on whether they're on Grand Award or whatever they're on. They may not be the same as the originals, and they may not be the same quality. They started in the 10-inch era, and you recognize Grand Award records. They have this picture frame that goes around the picture in the middle. And there were famous artists or known artists used to do the art, and so they're collectible for that reason. This record, I'm a big fan of Dinah Washington. I've shown it before. 1955, when it was issued in the mid-60s on stereo, of course, that was a different company then, and it had a different cover. But a lot of you guys give a short to these kind of records and don't pay any attention to them. Here, backing Dinah Washington, is Johnny Hodges, Charles Mingus, Earl Hines, Milt Jackson, Lucky Thompson, and a few others. Doesn't get much better than that. They, like all the others, had to issue a sampler record to tell how great it was. This is the early sampler from 1958. And then my favorite, Stereophonic Spectacular Grand Award. This one's a gorgeous copy. I had to get this one off of Discogs. It's not easy to find. This is a limited edition, and the previous record is numbered 400. This record is numbered 402. It was issued a little bit later in the same record label. One of the nice things about this record, it came with one of these inner sleeves that we just love. And that shows some of the records that they were promoting at that time. But what is one of the first records that they did and that they were busy promoting early on? Ragtime. Knuckles O'Toole plays the greatest all-time ragtime hits. This particular version came out in 1960, but it was issued on stereo in 58. And it may have even been issued, Grand Award may have been the first, because they were pressing some stereo records in 57 of some of this stuff, which was only issued in Canada, and then it came out later on the U.S. labels. Says Stereophonic Disc. Here's the same record, says world's finest high fidelity. This was the mono version. So let's hear a little bit about Knuckles O'Toole, which we'll hear more about later. May have been several different pianists on this record, but one of them was Dick Hyman. Many of you know that name. You'll be hearing more about him from me in the future. Records was formed in 1959, their very first record, which many of you are familiar with. These records have been shown a lot. 1959 RS 800 ED. This was the first. I got the near mint copy for $1. The cover was famous and influenced other artists by Joseph Albers, issued shortly thereafter, my copy 1960, stereo checkout record. A lot of people are still kind of interested in this record. You got some music to listen to, and you have some system setup tracks to see if your system is performing like it's supposed to. Another early record, Command got to be kind of stereotyped as the ping pong guys, and that wasn't always true. Yeah, the ping pong stuff was novelty early on, but they were also interested in music. He was a musician, and you need at least a few of these in your collection if you say you're a record collector, a music collector. The 9th record issued, bongos, bongos, bongos. A lot of percussion in these records, but these kind of things created a whole series of records by other companies about bongos, which people kind of make fun of today. Enoch Light left ABC Command in 1965. In 1963, he started a new label doing the same kind of thing, took Robert Fine with him. So these started in August of 1966. Here's one of my favorites. Dick Hyman we talked about, Knuckles O'Toole. Dick Hyman is still going today in his 90s. One of the greatest jazz pianists that ever lived, who most of you don't know. I'll be doing a video sometime in the near future just about Dick Hyman. Studio Project 3. These sound great. This is not hokey. This is one of the masters of jazz, ragtime, blues, stride piano, playing tunes by Scott Joplin, Jelly Roll Morton, Willie the Lion Smith, James P. Johnson, Eubie Blake, Fats Waller, and Duke Ellington. And he can emulate any of those guys. Well, let's listen to a track off of his first record. I'm saving RCA to last, and we'll try to make that fairly quick because that's the one everybody knows the most about. There were a few other also rans or nearly made it's, and Mercury, here called Perfect Presence, later to be Living Presence. This record, 1960, this was the second record issued in this series. And later on, the Mercury Living Present series were engineered by Robert Fine's wife. So it ran good in the family. New to me, until just a few days ago, was the United Artists Ultra Audio series. I want to give a shout out here to Scott Wilson, The Pressing Matters. He is an outstanding channel that plays and shows all kinds of music, has a great system, and he's one of the few people that shows this kind of stuff along with what everybody else is showing. He is also the guy who got a Command reel-to-reel tape and compared it to the record, which come out a little later, and I'm going to give you a link down below to that video so that you can check that out.
Hey everybody, welcome back to The Pressing Matters. I'm Scott. Thank you for tuning in today. Thank you for your support. Today, another tape to disc comparison as promised. This time, it's for an iconic LP from 1958 on the Command label. It's Persuasive Percussion by Terry Snyder and the All-Stars.
United Artists series. This one, Steve Lawrence and Edie Gourmet. It's the only one I have. I didn't even know I had one. Luckily, I had it logged in. So please check Scott's channel out. RCA, Living Stereo. Of course, they were a huge company at this time, and they had the resources to do it and make it go and make it popular. Now, the Living Stereo series is quite well known today. Lots of them have been reissued in audiophile condition, and so I'm not going to show all of that, but one of the early records, this is what the labels look like. This is LSC for Classical, 1806, 1959. Classical records used the Shaded Dog. One of my favorite recent acquisitions, Living Stereo, Frankie Carl and His Beautiful Dolls, 1958. Of course, we don't see the Shaded Dog here, and these are LSP for pop music. Let's listen to a tape that was issued in stereo before they could do the records. Here is a inner sleeve from 1959. Tells you how stereo works. And it's great because we can see what some of the early records are. Here is one from 1960. This came out of the record The High and the Mighty. And again, they got to explain stereo sound to you. Now, RCA came out with this Living Stereo in 1958, but by 1961 and 2, their marketing department was in gear in coordination with the recording department, and they come out with a new series, Stereo Action, Dynamic Dimensions. This record, 1961. These records were issued in 61 to 62. I was not even familiar with them. Watching a Vinyl Community YouTube video a couple years ago, he showed a couple of these, And I thought, holy cow. So I went to Discogs and ordered a few. I've since found some of them in the bins. Back in the day, I probably just passed them by with no idea what they were. This one is just the one I showed. I got a number of these now. I got this one for like about $10 on Discogs. It's still sealed, mint. Well, we do have a few other things. Other labels weren't sleeping on all this. So Vanguard, Stereo Lab, this record 1959, the last time I checked, it was not on Discogs. A unique stereophonic demonstration. Vanguard was there early on, and just got this one out, MGM stereo disc. This is E3800, so it's the first in the series. Joni James at Carnegie Hall, again in these beautiful high gloss jackets that really were popularized by Command Records. I'm just showing you this one because they had to put a gold sticker over it for you to open so that you would know this was the stereo version. Capitol got into it in 1958, as you would expect. Here's a Jonah Jones quartet swinging on Broadway. This is 1958, and this is one of the early Capitol stereo records. One of the things that's interesting, the whole research could be done on, is adoption rate. How soon was it for people to get into issuing stereo records and stereo records becoming popular? Well, it took a while for a number of reasons, just business-wise and technology-wise. First off, you had to have stereo equipment. It wasn't inexpensive, and so when this stuff come out, the music that was issued, that most of you now think of as hokey, is music for older people, which generally speaking had the money to buy the new equipment. RCA had a system where you could buy pieces to add into their mono system to make it stereo, but in general you had to get a new system together, and until about 1965 that wasn't that common, and really stereo was kind of a novelty until about 1967. In 1968, pretty much everybody was up to speed. The engineers had learned how to mix it. The mastering engineers had learned how to master it. And so by 1970, pretty much everything was stereo. Now, mono's kind of gotten popular again now, but a lot of stuff was not issued in mono. And it's kind of an audiophile thing now, and the reason why people focus on the mono of a lot of this early stuff is because often the stereo wasn't very well presented. We had stuff that was reissued in fake stereo where it was done electronically, and that kind of stuff probably actually hurt stereo and made it last a little longer before stereo was accepted in general. So we're going to close out here with a record that many of you have that's part of this series. We better have just a little listen of high-quality audiophile music. Here is the one that we showed in the catalog. This is the Acoustic Sounds reissue audiophile version of this record.
Thank you.
I say, keep 'em spinning, and see you all down the stereo trail.
Happy trails to you until